Hi there and welcome.
You're listening to Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm.
My name is Avantika, and I'm a researcher exploring animal consciousness, environmental sustainability, and planetary health. I want to help bring animal perspectives to the table and transform our relationship with the natural world.
And I'm Barbara. I'm an animal communicator and retired veterinarian. My true passion is exploring the hearts and souls of animals and helping people come to a much deeper understanding of who the animals truly are at their core.
This podcast is for anyone who loves animals and nature and has an interest in their own personal and spiritual development. We'll bring you powerful conversations with fascinating people about animal and nature sentience, consciousness, and communication.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of love, respect, understanding, and care for the fellow beings who share our beautiful Mother Earth with us. Hi, everyone. This is Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm. And I am really excited because I'm speaking with Scott Beckstead today, who is an amazing guy. He's a director of campaigns for Center for a Humane Economy and also Animal Wellness Action. He worked as an attorney in private practice for 17 years on the Central Oregon coast before going full-time to work in the animal protection sector. During his time on the coast, he was also a mayor of Waldport, Oregon for 5 years. He became known for his special expertise in the field of animal law and has taught that subject at the University of Oregon and Willamette University Law Schools. In 2000, he co-authored Animal Law, the first case book on the subject, and he continues to teach animal law, wildlife law, and policy. From 2008 to 2020, Scott served in a multitude of roles for the Humane Society of the United States, including Oregon State Director, Equine Protection Specialist, and Rural Outreach Director. He also helped lead a successful ballot measure campaign in 2016 to ban the trade in endangered wildlife in Oregon, which is great. Because of his close familiarity with horses, livestock, and farm animals, Scott provides training to law enforcement agencies on how to handle and work with those animals and how to investigate equine and livestock cruelty and neglect. He lives in Sutherland, Oregon with his family of 4 adult kids and 2 grandkids and 3 dogs. So welcome, Scott. It's just wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and the honor is all mine. I'm thrilled to be here and looking forward to a great conversation.
Yes, me too. So I would like to know, first of all, what led you to become a lawyer specializing in animal law? Can you just tell us a bit about your background?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was born and raised with animals. We had a small family farm, so I was surrounded by animals, including horses and cattle and all kinds of animals from the time I was born. And I always felt a very close affinity with animals, and I always counted the animals that we had as my very best friends. And I remember when I was about 10 years old, I was watching the news one evening with my mother, and there was a story about how they would club the little white baby seals for their fur coats. And I was very disturbed and very, very upset by that. And my mom said, you know, someday you could become a lawyer and work to pass laws to protect animals like that. And that really stuck with me. I always thought that maybe I might want to be a veterinarian just because I love the company of animals so much. But I'm, all of my strengths, my ability to read and understand and to write and to argue really lended themselves more to a legal career than a veterinary career. And so that's really what prompted me to become a lawyer. And I, throughout my time in law school, I knew that no matter what I did, I wanted to spend at least part of my time working for the protection of animals, and very glad that I did.
That's so great. I really have a lot of respect for you for that. And I'm glad you pursued that course.
Yes.
So,
Oh my.
yeah. But last week I was in on a hearing to pass a bill in the Oregon State Legislature to prevent having exotic animals in circuses like elephants. And oh my God, I came away from that really depressed, because even though there are a lot of people really defending the elephants and the other animals, there were also those who didn't want this law passed because it would encroach upon their business, which was rodeos or having people visit tortoises or whatever it was. And I just came away feeling really sad that people don't get it, who these animals are and how badly they're treated. So my curiosity is how you do this every day and don't become really depressed and just give up hope.
Well, I do sometimes get pretty discouraged, but I try very hard to keep my eye on the long game, and to, whenever I'm feeling like, things are so terrible, and it just feels like, there is this unending stream of terrible stories and terrible things that people do to animals. I try to step back and put where we are now into a broader historical perspective. And that's very helpful, because even though, bad things continue to happen, we are on a path absolutely to a kinder and gentler world. Unfortunately, it's a journey that is often, it feels like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Right when you think that, it's cause for celebration because you've passed, some important law, you find out that there is still more to be done, and that there are, there's other animals out there that still need help, and people out there still doing terrible things. So, so that's how I sort of keep my perspective, is just realizing that, number one, it's important to even that we have people like myself and yourself working, to make the world a kinder place by pushing for stronger laws and better education. Those things didn't exist 100 years ago, and, look at how far we've come in terms of, plant-based eating being, accepted, and the, there's a whole industry around plant-based foods, and people are eating less and less meat, and the even people that continue to eat meat are, demanding more and more that the animals that they're eating be raised in a humane and responsible way. The number of people who hunt, who kill animals for sport, continues to dwindle, and more people are enjoying wildlife with their camera and not with their gun. Look at the fact that, there used to be tens of millions of dogs and cats put to sleep every year in animal shelters across the country, and that number has dropped drastically, because, number one, there's less overbreeding of pets. There's I think the spay and neuter campaigns have really been successful, and more and more people, when they want a new pet, are more likely to go to the animal shelter rather than to the pet store. And so, again, yes, there is so much work left to be done, and there are still so many terrible things that happen to animals on a daily basis all over the world, but we are on the right path. and the overall trajectory. And I think Martin Luther King is the one who described this, that the arc of history bends toward justice and mercy and compassion. And so that's how I deal with it, Barbara. I try to step back, put where we are into a broader historical perspective, and realize that we are making progress. We will continue to make progress. We will continue to encounter setbacks and disappointments, but overall, we're doing the right thing.
Oh, what a great answer. It really helps me. I hope it helps other people listening here to just see that bigger picture, because it's so easy to get caught up in all this stuff that's not working instead of seeing.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, like, you know, my own story, I think, could be seen as kind of a microcosm of what is happening in society at large. I was born and raised on a farm where we raised cattle for their meat, for their beef, obviously. My grandfather was a mink farmer. I spent every Thanksgiving on my grandfather's mink farm killing and skinning mink by the thousands.
Oh my God.
To make fur coats. And now here I am, a person who I haven't eaten meat since 1988.
Wow.
And mink farming has basically almost become extinct because people no longer buy fur, because everyone understands how inhumane it is. I know I go out into the outdoors, but not with my gun, but with my camera. And I shoot animals all day, every day with my camera, not with my gun. And so, you know, even if you just look at me as an example, this is the direction we're heading. We're getting, we were raised, me and my 4 siblings were raised, by a father who was a very avid hunter. We hunted everything, big game, upland game, waterfowl, and not a single one of my siblings nor I hunt to this day.
Why is that? Why do you think?
I think just because we understand that there are better ways to enjoy wildlife. Wow. None of us have the desire. We all love the outdoors. You know, we love going outside and we love being out in nature, but none of us feel the need to include killing animals as part of that experience. That's so fantastic. if you look at how I have sort of changed and how I have sort of evolved, I think that it's a good example of what is happening to our society in general. And again, that doesn't mean that within our lifetime or even my kids' lifetime that we're going to see an end to some of the things that we still find so appalling and things that we know need to eventually end. But it's going to happen. If not in our lifetime, if not in our children's lifetime, maybe in their children's lifetime. So
yeah, that's wonderful. And what I remember from a previous conversation is when I asked you how you can deal with all this miserable stuff that you have to endure, you said that your dogs are what keep you going. So can you talk about that?
I have the 2 most ridiculous dogs on planet Earth. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I've got Atticus, who is also known as Addie, and his older sister Divvy, who's a little French bulldog. And they are both so ridiculous. And every day we go out and Atticus does his zoomies. And if you know what zoomies are, that's when dogs, race around for no reason other than because for the sheer exuberance and joy of it. And while he's doing that, his little French bulldog older sister looks at him with absolute disgust because she thinks it's a complete waste of time and she thinks it's utter nonsense. And I document the zoomies and the look of disapproval. And then I put those out on Facebook and people lose their minds. They think it's the best thing they've ever seen. So needless to say, my dogs have a larger social media following than I do. Atticus is on Instagram. His Instagram handle is zoom_Atti, ATTI_zoom. And all it is a collection of photographs of him out in nature, looking very beautiful in the trees and, with the lakes and the streams and the rivers, and also doing crazy zoomies, which of course means that there's also pictures of Divvy, his sister, looking completely unimpressed with the entire thing. So it keeps me very sane. It going out, spending time outdoors with my dogs, spending time outdoors with wildlife. Every single morning, Barbara, I visit with a family of beavers. I visit with a family of river otters. And that's just absolutely marvelous. And to see happy animals, I guess that's really the therapy, is seeing happy animals that are living their best lives, whether it's my dogs or whether it's the beaver family that's happily building their dams and teaching their little ones to swim, or the otters that are playing and doing somersaults in the water and so forth. That's pretty therapeutic. Whenever I think, gosh, I've just seen so much ugliness and there's so much terrible suffering in the world, I load up the dogs and we head out and we visit with the wildlife, and that seems to make everything all right.
Boy, I need to head up there. That sounds great. Otters and beavers every day.
Yeah, every morning. It's just part of my day, and it really helps with my mental health.
What kind of dog is Atticus?
He is a American Staffordshire, which is a pit bull type, mixed with Greyhound, mixed with Shar-Pei, and who knows what else. But he's pure white, and little Divvy, the French bulldog, she's also pure white. So both of my dogs are pure white, and they're both they're both full of beans, and they're pretty funny to watch.
That's so great. So great. So I know you also work a lot with horses, and you've done a lot with the wild horses, but also domestic ones. So can you talk a little bit about the issues the horses face and what can be done about them?
Sure. Well, my lifelong quest, and it's become a professional quest since since basically for most of my adult life, is we've got to end the slaughter of American horses for human consumption abroad. We do not raise horses in the United States to be food, just like we don't raise dogs and cats to be food. And, unfortunately, there are greedy, cruel people in this country who go to horse auctions and buy horses that are just often in the wrong place at the wrong time, and ship them to Canada and Mexico to be slaughtered, and their meat served up in countries like Europe and Japan and China and Russia. And it's a terrible, terrible betrayal of an animal that is raised to trust and depend on people, or if it happens to be an animal that was, rounded up by the federal government that was formerly wild. To take a formerly wild horse and put it on a truck to be shipped to Mexico to be slaughtered, it's just a terrible thing to do. And so there has been an effort in Congress for many years to finally put an end to that practice. We've got a new strategy for this Congress that we think is going to work. And basically our strategy is to amend a law that was passed in 2019 that banned the slaughter of dogs and cats for human consumption. And we would amend that law by adding the word "and equines," so that horses would be included in that prohibition. So that basically we're taking our top 3 companion animal species, dogs, cats, and horses, and protecting them from foreign meat markets. So that's probably the top the top equine welfare issue, and it affects all equines. It affects domestic horses. It affects wild horses, because even though the Bureau of Land Management has a stated policy of not allowing horses to go into the slaughter pipeline, They still do. They still allow horses to be adopted by people that they know are going to send those animals to slaughter. And so, there's plenty to be concerned about when you look at the issue of horse slaughter. But then there's also the issue of how our federal government is managing our wild horses and burros on our public lands in the American West. And in 1971, Congress unanimously passed the Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act. It was signed into law by President Nixon. It was a law that was passed at the urging of millions of Americans, but especially school children who sent letters by the millions into their members of Congress saying, please protect our wild horses. And unfortunately, that law turned the authority to enforce the law and to manage our wild horses and burros to the Bureau of Land Management. And that was the wrong agency to turn to give responsibility to, because the Bureau of Land Management is populated by people who are extremely sympathetic with the livestock industry. And so we are now in a position, the Bureau of Land Management is on a very aggressive campaign to remove as many wild and horses from our public lands as they possibly can. They're doing it at the behest of the livestock industry. And it's very disheartening, because we're in a place where we are now having to fight to protect our wild horses and burros from the very government agency that is supposed to be humanely managing them. It's kind of a topsy-turvy reality. But it's, they meaning the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, they have the full support of the beef industry and the livestock industry. And it's terrible, because they put out this very misleading narrative that these helicopter roundups, which are terribly inhumane and cause horses to get hurt and die, that these roundups have to happen because there are too many wild horses and burros out on our public lands. And what they don't tell people is that actually wild horses and burros are outnumbered 300-1 by cattle and sheep. So that's the piece that they leave out. They say there's way too many horses and burros on our public lands, but they don't say, and by the way, they're outnumbered 300-1 by cattle and sheep. And so it's very misleading. They're lying to the American people, and they're lying to Congress. And Congress, unfortunately, members of Congress, they just sort of, they are spoon-fed by this agency. They take whatever the agency tells them as the gospel truth. And so, it's this never-ending battle to make sure that we get the word out there that the Bureau of Land Management is lying to the American people. They are mismanaging our public lands by allowing cattle and sheep to overgraze and destroy our public lands. And then they're lying to the American people by blaming all of that harm to the rangelands to a few thousand wild horses. So that's what we're up against. And it's infuriating, and and to see these public lands ranchers that they pay less every month to graze a cow-calf pair on public lands than you and I spend every day to feed a dog for one day. They pay $1.35 per animal unit month to graze their livestock on our public lands. And so they're getting a killer deal. They're ruining our rangelands, and in the process, they are getting our federal government to remove to remove wild horses and burros from their habitat, and not just that, but to kill all the wolves, kill the grizzlies, kill the coyotes, kill the mountain lions, all the wildlife these public land ranchers want gone, because that wildlife affects their bottom line. So it's a terribly corrupt system, and we, the taxpayers, and the wild animals that we love, are paying the price.
Isn't there some kind of oversight, like when the presidency, for instance, and Congress, when they change hands, isn't there a change in some of these bureaucratic governmental organizations?
What you find, Barbara, is that regardless of which party is in office, regardless of who's in the White House, regardless of who has the majorities in Congress, it's all the same. What it comes down to is the lobbying influence of the beef industry, and the beef industry, they portray themselves as representing hardworking American farmers and ranchers. And what they don't say, of course, is that most of the grazing permittees, the people who have grazing permits on our public lands, are not mom and pop ranchers, but multi-billionaires and multinational corporations that own these grazing permits. Again, that's a very misleading thing, that Congress believes that that they're sticking up for the hardworking ranching families. They're not. They're standing up for super powerful elite corporations based in China, based in Brazil, in countries other than here in the United States. And a lot of this beef that's being raised on our public lands, that our wildlife and our wild horses are being, killed for, aren't even American companies. And a lot of that beef is being exported to foreign countries. So getting the truth out there is our number one job on this topic. And, whether you're talking about protecting wild horses, or whether you're talking about protecting wolves or grizzlies or bison, these are all the species that the ranchers want gone. And who are they raising their animals for? For the big global meat companies like JBS out of Brazil, Smithfield out of China, and so who is supporting those big global meat companies? The people that are buying the beef, the American consumer. A lot of American consumers don't realize that when they go to the grocery store or to the restaurant and they buy beef, they're supporting an industry that is absolutely terrible for the earth and for the animals. And not just the cattle that are, of course, being raised and slaughtered for beef, but also all of the animals that are being killed to make more habitat available to cattle and sheep rather than wildlife.
Jeez, that's pretty upsetting, huh? I can see why you like to go home and play with your doggies. It's got to be really hard.
Well, no, but again, I'm doing the work that I feel like I was born to do, and I was raised with cattle. We had cattle growing up, and I love cattle. I love.
You told me that. You told me you love cattle. I thought that was so cool.
I adore cattle. I think that they're amazing animals. They get a bad rap. I think it makes it easier for people to eat them if they think of cattle as sort of dim-witted and slow. But as I think I told you, the smartest animal I have ever known in my entire life was a cow. She was a problem solver. She was a thinker. And when I think of, the relationships that our cows had with each other, they're amazing animals. But I often, when I'm out there in the world talking about, the need to reform public lands, ranching and stuff like that, I often, people will say, well, you probably don't even eat meat, or you're probably some East Coast vegan yuppie or whatever. And when I tell them, no, actually, I'm an Idaho cowboy. I was born and raised with horses and cattle. That at least, it takes that argument away from them. They can't accuse me of being, some do-gooder who doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Amazing. And is there anything that we, just the general public, lay people, what can we do to help with these things? Yes. Would it be supporting organizations like yours? And will you just tell us a little bit about who you work for?
Yeah, so I work for two affiliated organizations, Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. And these are organizations that work to reform the laws as well as business practices around animal welfare. So we are very active at the federal level. We have lobbyists on Capitol Hill all day, every day, meeting with members of Congress. And then we also have a presence at the state level. I'm very active here in Oregon, especially on issues around Oregon wildlife. And so we are working hard every single day to change the law, to change the way corporations do business, to make them more humane. We just, a couple of important victories that I will mention. We just recently, one of our signature campaigns was a campaign to stop athletic shoe companies like Nike and Puma and Adidas to stop using kangaroo skins to make soccer cleats, because it was driving the slaughter of 2 million kangaroos every year. And just in the past couple weeks, both Puma and Nike have announced that they will no longer use kangaroo skins to make soccer cleats. And we expect that Adidas will make a similar announcement very soon. And that is a direct result of our persistent campaign to get those companies to be more responsible about where they source the materials for their products. And then, another important victory in the last Congress that expired at the end of last year, we passed the FDA Modernization Act, which basically repealed the legal requirement that pharmaceutical companies test new drugs on animals as part of the drug development process. Because of that outdated law passed back in the 1940s, millions of animals are used in terrible laboratory tests to test new drugs. And it's not like the pharmaceutical industry wants to do that. They're required to do it. So Congress passed a law that we got introduced, the FDA Modernization Act, and repealed that law. And that is going to spare millions of animals from those horrible, horrible, and very lethal and painful tests. And we know that that those animal tests are highly unreliable anyway. The vast majority of new drugs tested on animals, the animal tests aren't predictive of how that drug is going to respond in people, because animals and people are different. And the great thing about that FDA Modernization Act was that it was bipartisan. It was sponsored by Rand Paul, a conservative Republican out of Kentucky, and Cory Booker, a liberal Democrat out of New Jersey. Here are two, diametrically opposed on so many issues, two senators who came together and said, we agree that this is something that really needs to change. And they put aside their partisan differences, and we got that bill passed. And it's going to mean that millions of animals are going to be spared from those terrible laboratory tests.
That's fantastic.
So the organizations I work for are doing marvelous things, marvelous work. We work on a broad variety of issues, and having a steady daily presence on Capitol Hill obviously is very helpful. But also the founder and president of these organizations is Wayne Pacelle. That's probably a name that many of your listeners will recognize. He was the former president and CEO of the Humane Society of the United States. He left in 2018 to start these new organizations. Wayne is a visionary. He's probably had a greater impact on animal welfare than any other single human being. He basically, Wayne Pacelle, transformed the animal movement from this sort of fringe movement that was kind of seen by many as sort of, radical and extreme, into a political juggernaut, a serious force to be reckoned with, where animal protection is now a mainstream topic. It's a mainstream issue for Congress. It's a mainstream issue for state legislatures and for businesses. And so to be able to work, with Wayne and to be part of this organization that is moving to really push the needle and make all of these social institutions like legislatures and schools and businesses to adopt mainstream humane values. It's very rewarding work.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And I'm just wondering, you're talking a lot about the US, and some people listening will be from Canada or other countries around the world. So there are many, many organizations that are now working for animal welfare, right? People just need to research and see which ones are legitimate. And
yes, and I always tell people, I often get asked, should I donate to a big national organization, an organization that does national work, or should I donate to my local dog and cat shelter? And I always say you can do both. If you want to have a local impact, if you want to help the animals in your community, you really need to give and volunteer to your local animal shelter and local groups that are helping animals locally. But you can also support organizations like the ones I work for that are, working on a national and even global level to help animals, here in the United States and all over the world. You can do both. It's not an either or proposition. You can help at your animals in your local community, and you can help animals all over the world.
Yes. So after working for so many years with animals on these issues and living with animals, how do you feel about animal consciousness? What's your feeling about that?
I think that science is waking up to the reality and the truth that all of us animal people have known from the beginning of time, that animal consciousness is real, that the animal mind is a real thing. Whenever I see a headline like scientists are now convinced that dogs feel joy, it's like, sometimes I feel like scientists are literally the dumbest people out there, because every time they make some radical discovery that all the rest of us have known forever. I mean, really? You're just now figuring out that dogs have emotions? Really? I feel like, the scientific community, they find it easier to not get into issues of animal emotions and sentience and consciousness, because it makes it easier for them to do terrible things to animals in laboratories, but of course animals have emotions, and they have incredible cognitive abilities. One thing that I think is really interesting is that there's more and more work being done on fish cognition and marine life cognition. We are finding out that the animals that live in the ocean have intelligence. I mean, look at the intelligence of the octopus. The octopus has incredible problem-solving capabilities. They can figure out puzzles. They can outthink your basic, school kid. And we're finding out that, that there are entire cultures among species of fish. And so now that, it feels like science is finally getting serious about understanding the animal brain, the animal mind, how it works, how animals feel, how they perceive their world. And I think that as that awareness grows and as scientific study continues to grow, I think that is going to push the animal welfare movement even more, because what it does is it makes us, the empathetic parts of ourselves realize that the reality that we experience is very similar to the reality that animals experience. And if we know that something would be unpleasant for us or cause suffering for us, we know that it would do the very same thing for animals, and of course that makes us less likely to want to engage in those kinds of activities. So I fully support the ongoing work to understand animal consciousness. And I would point out, and I'm sure you know this, that the University of Denver in Colorado has just opened a whole new program that is all around animal sentience and animal consciousness, and it is super exciting. An entire program at a top university focusing specifically on sentience, consciousness, and animal welfare. It's mind-blowing stuff.
I didn't know that. Which university is it? Is it University of Colorado in Denver, or is something else?
Denver University.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I believe it's organized as part of their law school, but I'm happy to send you more information about it, Barbara.
Please
but
do.
It's very exciting, and the grand opening ceremony was just a couple weeks ago, and the governor of Colorado was there and he spoke, and it promises to really sort of open a new frontier in the conversations around how we should be treating animals given their consciousness and their ability to feel and experience and all of those things.
Great. And you might not be aware that the University of Saskatchewan is putting on a symposium. It's the second annual symposium that's all about animal communication, animal consciousness. And they're doing some incredible research there that's showing that animal communication is real, that animals really can communicate with us telepathically and otherwise, that they're spiritual beings. And Avantika, who's my co-host of this podcast, she's coordinating that symposium. So there really are things happening. At the same time, I was just really disappointed when I just have finished a book that's about to be published on elephants, and I wanted to send it to a researcher who's been studying elephants in the wild for many, many, many years and has written some wonderful books. And I just thought maybe she could read my book and maybe endorse it. And she said she, of course, loves animals and loves elephants. She loves her dogs, all this stuff. But that to condone telepathic communication would jeopardize her authority as a scientist. And I found that really disappointing. I mean, I've encountered that for the last 30, 40 years in the scientific community, but it's still there. It's still going on, that same mindset, Well,
I think that, to me, what's discouraging is that she discounts it out of hand without even saying, I would love to see more research on that, or I would love to see more research done on that. It's just, this is the exact same response that scientists used to give to the notion that animals are capable of feeling emotions, or even that animals are capable of feeling pain. I mean, remember that Rene Descartes, the father of Cartesian science, he lived back in, I think, the 17th century, and he denied that animals could even suffer. Yeah. He said the sound of a dog screaming in pain was no different than the ticking of a clock. Yeah. And we think of that now. I mean, how barbarous is that? How completely lacking in basic understanding that is, and yet he's considered, a major pioneer for modern scientific thought. And I still feel like much of science is rooted in that same closed-minded arrogance, that because we can't observe it with the naked eye, it can't be real, and we don't even want to waste our time on it. Right. And so but again, I think that eventually scientists are going to have to start paying attention And I think that once they do, I think there will be more research done, and hopefully that will yield a greater understanding, and that greater understanding will result in better laws and the better treatment of animals overall.
Exactly. And it's not all negative. Like you've talked about some of the advances. Like when I went to veterinary school, we'd spay a dog or do a surgery, and there was no pain medication afterwards. Now there's a whole field in veterinary medicine with all kinds of drugs that they use for pain just routinely after surgeries or with illnesses. So things are changing. It's just kind of a slow process, not as fast as I would like.
But look, that is how every social movement moves a lot slower than we would like. Yeah. Whether look how long it took to get from the Emancipation Proclamation to the Civil Rights Act. Yeah. It took a century. It took a century, to get to a place where Black Americans had the right to vote. Yeah. And look at what they had to go through to get there.
Well, and still are going through.
And right. Yeah. And the fight is not over. Right. But so again, social movements, they go very slowly, and we all would love to see radical transformation during our lifetimes, but sadly that just isn't typically how things go. Right. You get involved to make things better. You'll never get all of your goals accomplished, but the beauty is in the journey, not the destination, as I like to say. That there will always be terrible people who want to do terrible things to animals, no matter how many good laws are passed, no matter how many abusive practices we put an end to. Getting rid of human cruelty, that's just something that we as a species are going to have to evolve out of, and that could take hundreds or even thousands of years. And in the meantime, we still have to get up every day and do our work of trying to make the world a better place.
Exactly. And I think there are a lot of people really waking up now and realizing that things are changing, and that animals have sentience, that human beings, we're all one big family. So I think things are moving pretty quickly now, maybe more so than they did, 50 or 100 years ago. But it's still quite a process.
And I think too, often I hear someone say, gosh, it just seems like you hear of so many terrible stories of people doing bad things to animals, and why does it seem like there are more terrible things happening to animals? And I don't think there are more terrible things happening to animals. I think there's greater awareness. Yeah. And there is a greater willingness on the part of people to stand up. A good example, maybe 20 years ago, someone driving down the road who sees a skinny, starving horse standing in a field, they feel bad, but they just keep growing. They keep going. They feel bad, but they don't do anything about it. Nowadays, if your average person drives down the road and sees a skinny horse, they are far more likely to pick up the phone and call the sheriff and say, someone needs to come check out this animal. It used to be that people would be like, well, that's sad, but it's not really my business. That's not my animal. And, nowadays people are far more likely to get involved for that animal and speak up. And we're also, seeing that law enforcement is more willing to take action in situations like that, and investigate, and if necessary, arrest and bring charges. So, I think it's not a matter of people, there being more cruelty in the world. I think there's more awareness of the cruelty in the world, and that's obviously a positive thing.
Right. Yes. So this has been so wonderful. Is there anything you would like to add before we close, Scott?
If I had a parting shot, it would be, of course, for my beloved horses that I love so much. My wish would be for listeners to call 202-224-3121 and ask for both of your United States senators and your U.S. representative, and urge them to take a stand for animals, and to stop the slaughter of American horses for human consumption, stand up for our wild horses, and let your members of Congress know that they have a constituent who cares about animals and is willing to call and be heard. So that would be my one wish for people listening to this program.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. This has been so extraordinary, and I feel really hopeful now and inspired.
Good.
And yeah, realizing that there are people like you out there fighting for the animals, fighting for us, and that changes are happening. They may not always be as fast as we would like, but changes are happening and people are becoming more aware. And I know the animals are appreciating this kind of work. So thank you so much.
I don't think my little French bulldog appreciates it. I think that she looks at me and says, "You need to do better, mister."
I don't think so. I think it's an act. I think she's putting it on for you.
It very well could be. Very well could be.
Yeah. So thank you, Scott. And we're going to close now with a blessing for the animals. We'd like to end this podcast by taking just a moment to be quiet. And we give thanks and blessings to these amazing animals that we share our lives with. They give us so much and ask for so little in return. We hope that you can keep the animals and all living beings in your heart and in your mind as you go about your day. Thank you so much for being here with us today.